Tuesday, 9 a.m. The breakfast burrito I'd picked up from the food truck outside was still warm when I found the HR notice sitting on my keyboard. Clean white envelope, company letterhead, my name typed across the front like it belonged on a headstone. Derek Holloway must have had someone slip it there while I was parking my truck in the garage. No phone call, no meeting invite. Just an envelope and the hum of the HVAC system that had been broken for 2 weeks because Derek decided maintenance was a non-essential cost center. I set the burrito down and opened the envelope with one finger. Termination of employment effective immediately. 29 years. One envelope, 2 sentences. My name is Nathan Caldwell. I'm 54 years old, and I just got fired from MedBridge Logistics, the pharmaceutical supply chain company I'd spent more of my life building than anything else, including, if I'm honest, my marriage. MedBridge moved critical medications from manufacturers to hospital networks across 12 states. We kept insulin on shelves in Amarillo. We made sure chemotherapy drugs hit oncology floors in Nashville on time. The system that made all of that work, the inventory routing platform we called ClearPath, was mine. Not in the way you say something is yours when you feel proud of it. Mine in a way that would become very clear to a lot of people in exactly 72 hours. What Derek Holloway didn't understand when he had that envelope placed on my keyboard at 9 in the morning was that he'd just started a clock. My $195,000 performance bonus was scheduled to process this Friday at noon. I'd been watching that date on my calendar for 6 months. And Derek, who'd been married into this company for 3 years and made CEO 8 months ago because his father-in-law needed someone to run the numbers while he played golf in Scottsdale, had apparently decided that cutting my bonus would impress the board ahead of the Vantage Health acquisition. Smart, in the way that touching a live wire is smart. What his Harvard Business School education had not covered was what happened when the payment didn't clear. Robert Ashworth had been careful about that. Robert founded MedBridge in 1994 out of a converted warehouse in Northwest Houston. He'd started as a hospital pharmacist, watched supply chain failures kill people, and decided to fix the problem himself. By the time I joined in my mid-20s, he'd built something real, a company with a conscience, and a founder who understood that the people who actually built things needed to be protected from the people who would eventually try to take them apart. 7 years into my time at MedBridge, Robert sat me down in his office, real Texas oak furniture, framed photos of his grandkids, a whiteboard covered in logistics diagrams, and told me something I'd kept close ever since. "Nathan," he said, "I'm going to be gone someday, retired or dead, one or the other. And when I'm gone, someone is going to look at what you've built and try to own it without understanding it. I want to make sure that can't happen without consequences." The clause he had written into my contract was clean and specific. If my annual performance bonus failed to deposit by the contractual payment date for any reason, including termination, legal ownership of the ClearPath platform, and all associated intellectual property would transfer automatically to me. The transfer documents had been sitting in escrow for 15 years, filed with the state of Texas, waiting for the one trigger Robert had designed them around, the payment that didn't come. And without ClearPath, MedBridge had nothing to offer. Vantage Health except an office building in Houston and Derek's PowerPoint slides. I signed the termination paperwork without saying a word. My pen didn't shake. I'd been expecting this conversation for 4 months, ever since Derek restructured the executive team and started describing my department as legacy overhead. I knew what that meant. I'd heard it used about people before. On my way out of the building, I stopped by my office one last time. My team was in a Tuesday stand-up meeting down the hall. I could hear Marcus Tran's voice walking through the weekly routing report, the same cadence I'd listened to for 6 years. I didn't interrupt. I took the photo of my wife off my desk, left the industry awards exactly where they were, and put a blank notepad on my keyboard where the envelope had been. Let Derek wonder. I walked out through the lobby past the wall-length photo of the original MedBridge warehouse, past the reception desk where Carol had been greeting me for 11 years, past the mission statement Robert had written himself and insisted be mounted in visible letters. The right medication, the right patient, the right time. Outside in the September heat, Houston, in the fall, where summer doesn't know it's supposed to leave, I sat in my truck for a minute with the engine running and the AC on. 29 years, 72 hours. I drove home through the medical center corridor, past the hospital complexes that were, in a very practical sense, kept running by the work my team did every single day. Patricia was in the backyard when I pulled in, watering the container garden she'd started after she retired from nursing 2 years ago. She looked up at me over the tops of the tomato plants, read something in my face, and turned off the hose. "Was it Derek?" she asked. "Derek," She didn't say anything for a moment. She pulled off her gardening gloves the way she used to pull off surgical gloves, practiced, deliberate, nothing wasted. How bad is it? I handed her the termination notice. She read it twice. Her jaw tightened on the second pass the same way it always did when something made her angry and she was deciding whether to say so. Effective immediately. She looked up. He didn't even give you a day. He wanted me out of the building before I could talk to anyone. The bonus. Friday at noon. He thought cutting it would look decisive to the vantage board. She turned back toward the garden, and I could see her working through it the way she always worked through things, methodically, checking her assumptions before she spoke. That's the money we were going to use for the addition on the house. Ryan and Cassie need the space when they move back from Austin. Ryan was our son. He and his wife were expecting their second child in April, and the plan had been to finish the back bedroom so they could actually live with us during the transition, instead of paying rent across town. I know, I said. Patricia studied my face. After 31 years, she knew my tells better than any cardiologist. But there's something else. You've got that look you get when you already know how it ends. I poured us both a glass of iced tea from the pitcher she kept on the patio table, sweet tea, the way her mother had made it, the way I'd learned to love it, and sat down in the shade of the pergola we'd built together this summer. Our youngest left for college. Do you remember what Robert said at his retirement dinner about protecting the work? I remember he cried during the speech, Patricia said. That surprised me. I'd never seen him cry before. He wasn't crying about leaving. He was crying because he was worried about what would happen after. He'd watched too many good companies get stripped down by people who thought they understood something they'd never actually done. I turned the glass in my hands. So he wrote something into my contract. Patricia set down her tea. What kind of something? The kind that says if my bonus doesn't deposit by Friday at noon for any reason, including if I'm terminated before the payment date, full legal ownership of ClearPath transfers to me. Every patent, every license, every integration agreement tied to the platform, not MedBridge, me. She was quiet for a long moment. A mockingbird was cycling through its repertoire in the oak tree at the back of the yard. Down the street, someone was running a lawnmower. And without ClearPath, she said slowly, Vantage Health has no reason to pay $380 million for MedBridge. The entire acquisition thesis depends on that platform. Patricia leaned back in her chair and looked at the sky with the expression she'd worn in the ER when a situation had gone sideways, and she was calculating exactly what needed to happen and in what order. Nathan, she said, Robert really did plan for everything. He spent 30 years watching good people get thrown away by bad decisions. He was thorough. I went upstairs to the home office I'd built in the corner of our second floor, the one with the window that looks out over the neighborhood where we'd lived for 22 years. I opened the project management system I'd maintained on my personal server. Robert had told me to keep my own backup of everything that mattered, and pulled up the automated protocol I'd configured years ago, and updated annually, the way you service something important. A countdown timer. 71 hours, 44 minutes, 16 seconds. The protocol was straightforward. If the ClearPath licensing certificates weren't renewed by Friday at noon, which they couldn't be without my active employee credentials, a message would send automatically to 3 contacts at Vantage Health. Sandra Pierce, their general counsel, Tom Wakefield, their VP of integration, and Dr. Elaine Cho, their chief information officer, who had personally signed off on ClearPath's compatibility assessment during due diligence. The message was professional and brief. As of Friday, September 19th, at 12 p.m., MedBridge Logistics no longer holds valid licensing rights to the ClearPath platform central to the pending Vantage acquisition. Please review Section 9 of the acquisition agreement regarding key personnel continuity requirements. Section 9. The provision that named 3 MedBridge employees as essential to the technical integration. My name was first. Derek had signed that acquisition agreement 6 months ago at a press event at the downtown Marriott. I'd been in the room. He'd been very pleased with himself. I set the countdown timer on my secondary monitor and watched it tick. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Tran, my senior platform engineer. Mr. Caldwell, heard what happened. This isn't right. Can we talk? I called him back immediately. Marcus, sir, I wanted you to know Derek asked me to pull the ClearPath admin credentials 20 minutes after you left. Full system access. Were you able to? No, sir. The credentials are biometric locked. I told him that. He didn't seem to know that. Of course he didn't. Derek had been at MedBridge for 3 years and had never once asked how the platform actually worked. He knew what it was worth on a balance sheet. What did he do? He asked me to call the original development vendor. I told him ClearPath was built in-house and there is no vendor to call. He told me to figure it out. Marcus paused. Sir, he also asked me if I'd be interested in moving into a leadership role on the platform team. What did you say? I said I'd think about it. I smiled. Marcus was 28, the most technically gifted person I'd worked with since I was his age, and he had enough professional instinct to not close a door before he understood what was behind it. Think carefully, I said. And Marcus, whatever happens in the next few days, you have a real future in this industry. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Sir, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying keep your options open. That evening, I composed a careful email to Harriet Cross, MedBridge's longest-serving board member and the one person on that board Robert had personally trusted. Harriet had been there since year 3 of the company. She understood what MedBridge was actually built on. Harriet, I assume Vantage is already asking questions about Section 9. As you know, my departure creates certain contractual obligations that may affect the platform licensing status before Friday's payment date. If the board wants to discuss options before the deadline, I'm available, but not through Derek. Nathan. I sent it and watched the countdown. Wednesday, 7:15 a.m. The missed calls started before sunrise. 2 from unknown numbers, 1 from a Houston Chronicle reporter I recognized from industry coverage, 1 from someone at Vantage Health's legal team whose name I didn't know. I let them all go to voicemail. Patricia found me in the kitchen making coffee and reading the financial news on my tablet. MedBridge wasn't public, but its acquisition had been announced publicly, and anything that moved that deal moved coverage. Your phone was going all night, she said. I know. She poured herself a cup and sat across from me at the kitchen island. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up, sprinkler systems, cycling, a school bus making its early rounds. How are you feeling? I slept better than I have in 2 years, I said. And it was true. Something that had been knotted in my chest for months had loosened when I drove out of that parking garage. Ryan called last night. I didn't tell him anything yet. Don't. Not until Friday. My email chimed. Sandra Pierce, General Counsel at Vantage Health. Mr. Caldwell, we've received some conflicting information regarding your current employment status at MedBridge and would appreciate a brief conversation at your earliest convenience regarding the Section 9 compliance requirements. In our acquisition agreement, I responded with one sentence. I'm available by phone this morning if you'd like to discuss the licensing situation directly. She called 11 minutes later. Mr. Caldwell, thank you for being available. I'll get right to the point. We've been notified by multiple sources, including one media inquiry this morning, that there have been personnel changes at MedBridge affecting the technical integration timeline. Can you confirm your current employment status? I was terminated effective yesterday morning. A measured pause. Mr. Caldwell, that creates a significant problem for us under the terms of the acquisition agreement. Section 9 is quite specific about essential personnel requirements, and your name appears first on the list. Additionally, we've requested updated ClearPath licensing certifications from MedBridge and have been told there are delays. I can't speak to MedBridge's internal processes. I'm no longer an employee. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you able to tell us whether the platform licensing will remain intact through the acquisition closing? That depends on decisions made before Friday at noon. After that point, the answer becomes more complicated. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and watched the countdown. 48 hours, 3 minutes, 22 seconds. By that afternoon, I had a voice message from Tom Wakefield at Vantage and an email from their CIO. I didn't respond to either. I went with Patricia to pick up our grandson from preschool Owen, 3 years old, Patricia's favorite person in any room, and spent an hour in a park that I hadn't visited on a weekday in 9 years because I had always been working. Thursday, 6 a.m. I woke up to 17 unread emails and a voicemail from Harriet Cross. Nathan, the board held an emergency session last night. Derek has been placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the termination decision and several other actions he took regarding the acquisition documentation. Richard, that's Arthur Holloway, Derek's father-in-law and the company chairman, is not doing well. I think he's beginning to understand the scope of what his son-in-law didn't understand. Call me when you can. I sat in bed for a moment in the early morning quiet. Patricia was still asleep. Through the window, I could see the oak tree in our backyard catching the first light, the one we'd planted the year we moved in, the year Ryan was born. It was 40 feet tall now. I called Harriet back. Nathan. She sounded tired in the way people sound when they've been making difficult decisions since midnight. First, Thank you for the email. It gave the board enough warning to get ahead of the worst of it. Second, and I want to be direct with you, Vantage has formally invoked Section 9. They've suspended the acquisition timeline pending resolution of the licensing status. Their lawyers used the phrase potential material misrepresentation in a letter that arrived at 4 in the morning. That's a serious phrase. It is. Nathan, I need to ask you something that I think I already know the answer to. The ClearPath ownership situation, can you actually take control of that platform? When my bonus doesn't deposit at noon tomorrow, yes. The transfer documents have been in escrow since 2009. Robert was very thorough. Harriet was quiet for a long moment. I could hear papers shuffling on her end. I've been on this board for 26 years, she said. I was there when Robert wrote that contract. He told me he'd built in certain protections, but he never told me the specifics. I think I understand now why. She paused. 843 employees, Nathan. People with families. That landed where it was supposed to land. Robert had hired those people. I'd hired a lot of them myself. Marcus Tran had been a college intern before I brought him on full-time. The routing team leads had been with us for a decade. The warehouse coordinators who kept our Houston hub running had mortgages and kids in school. I know, I said. Is that who you're trying to protect, or is this about Derek? I looked out the window at that oak tree. Honestly, it started out being about Derek. About 29 years meaning something. About not getting thrown away by someone who couldn't explain what our company actually does. I paused, but somewhere around Wednesday afternoon in that park with Owen, I stopped thinking about Derek altogether. Then what are you thinking about? What Robert would want me to do with what he built. And I don't think Robert would want 843 people to lose their jobs to prove a point. Another silence. What do you need, Nathan? I need to know Derek is permanently out. I need to know the board is actually going to run this company the right way going forward. And I need to have that conversation directly with Arthur Holloway before Friday noon. Thursday, 2:30 p.m. The call with Arthur came that afternoon. Arthur Holloway was 71 years old and had built his own company commercial real estate with the kind of patient, deliberate work that earned real respect. He'd invested in MedBridge 4 years ago because he believed in what Robert had built, and he'd made the mistake of thinking his son-in-law had the competence and the character to run it. He sounded, on the phone, like a man who was reckoning with something costly. Nathan, I owe you an apology that I should deliver in person. You don't have to do that, Arthur. I do. Derek was my decision. I thought he had the right instincts. I was wrong about that, and the consequences of my mistake are landing on people who did nothing wrong. He cleared his throat. The board voted this morning. Derek's employment is terminated, effective immediately. I let that settle. Arthur, I want you to know something. I never intended for this to become about destroying MedBridge. What Robert built matters. The work matters. The people doing it matter. I know that. That's why I'm calling you instead of having lawyers call you. He paused. What will it take to keep that acquisition on track? I have 3 conditions. Tell me. First, Marcus Tran gets promoted to VP of Platform Engineering immediately. He understands ClearPath better than anyone currently in that building, and he has the character to lead that team the right way. Second, MedBridge establishes a formal succession program for technical leadership. No more single points of failure, no more situations where one person's departure can hold an entire company hostage. That's a vulnerability Robert would have wanted fixed. I paused. Third, I consult on the Vantage integration for 6 months. Part-time, remote, on my terms. After that, I'm retired. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Done, he said. All 3. Nathan, I want you to know that what you built over 29 years is the reason there's a company left to save. I won't forget that. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and looked at the countdown timer. 19 hours, 40 minutes, 11 seconds. Patricia knocked on the office door and came in. She had 2 glasses of iced tea and the look she got when she'd made a decision about something. How did it go? Better than I expected. Worse than Derek deserved. She handed me one of the glasses and sat in the chair across from my desk, the one where, over the years, junior engineers had sat when they needed help with something that seemed impossible. Your chest, she said. I touched my sternum before I could stop myself. The tightness I'd been carrying for 8 months was still there. Duller now, but present. Better. Dr. Martinez said, your blood pressure has been elevated at your last 3 appointments. She said that wasn't a suggestion, Nathan. She said stress is doing things to you that we need to take seriously. I looked at her across the desk. 31 years. She'd worked night shifts when I worked late. covered for my absences at school plays and anniversary dinners I'd missed because of system failures and client emergencies. She'd never once made me feel guilty for it, but she'd kept a running count. "I know," I said. "I need you to actually know it this time. Not in the way you say you know it and then take a call during Thanksgiving dinner. This is different. Tell me why." I thought about it for a moment, really thought about it, because this time I'm not fighting to keep a job. I'm finishing something, and when it's finished, I'm done. Robert always said every project needs a real ending, not just a fade out. This is mine. Patricia studied me with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent 30 years assessing whether people were telling the truth about how they felt. "Then finish it," she said, "and come back to us." That evening, I got a call from Dr. Elaine Cho, the CIO at Vantage Health. Not her assistant, her, Mr. Caldwell. "I've been following this situation closely, and I want to be direct with you. Vantage's entire integration strategy was built around ClearPath's architecture. We didn't just want to acquire MedBridge, we wanted to understand how you built what you built and extend it across our network." She paused. "We have a proposal for you that's separate from the acquisition. Direct consulting agreement. 3 years. We want you to lead the development of the next generation of that platform. What kind of compensation are we talking about?" She named a number that made me set down my glass. It was more than I would have earned in the remaining years of my career at MedBridge at full salary. "That's substantial," I said. "You built something that solves a problem that kills people when it goes wrong. That's worth paying for." She paused. "Would you be open to a formal conversation Friday afternoon?" I looked at the countdown timer on my screen. "I'll be available Friday afternoon," I said. Friday, 10:45 a.m. The conference room at MedBridge looked different with me sitting on the visitor side of the table. Arthur Holloway was there in person. I hadn't expected that, along with Harriet, 2 other board members, and a video call connection to Sandra Pierce and Tom Wakefield at Vantage. The chairs on the MedBridge side were reorganized. Derek's usual seat at the head of the table, conspicuously occupied by no one. Arthur stood when I walked in. "Nathan," he extended his hand. "Thank you for coming back." I shook it. We sat down. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms get quiet before something important is decided. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to confirm the 3 conditions from our call yesterday are formally on the record with the board." Harriet nodded. "Confirmed and documented. Marcus Tran will be promoted effective today. The succession program will be established within 60 days. Your consulting arrangement will cover the Vantage integration for 6 months, part-time, remote. Then let's talk about what happens at noon." I opened my laptop and pulled up the escrow transfer interface, the one Robert's attorneys had built 15 years ago, the one that had been sitting dormant in a legal partition, waiting for exactly this moment. At 12 p.m., if the ClearPath licensing transfer completed as designed, I would own that platform. Every integration, every patent, every line of code my team had spent a decade refining, I would own it for whatever I decided to do with it next. My watch showed 11:58. Tom Wakefield spoke from the screen. "Mr. Caldwell, Vantage needs confirmation that ClearPath licensing will be intact for the acquisition to proceed. We're prepared to move forward on the original terms if that confirmation is possible." "It will be," I said. At 12 p.m. exactly, my phone buzzed. Bank notification. $195,000 deposited to checking. Simultaneously, a green indicator appeared on my laptop screen. The escrow transfer had completed. Legal ownership of the ClearPath platform now resided with Nathan Allen Caldwell, private individual, Houston, Texas. I held that for exactly 30 seconds. I looked around the conference room at Harriet, who had been on this board since before my son was born. At Arthur, who was watching me, with the careful attention of a man who understood he was watching something consequential. At the video screen where the Vantage team was waiting, then I pulled up the transfer interface and typed in MedBridge's corporate entity credentials. "MedBridge Logistics retains full licensing rights to the ClearPath platform," I said. "The acquisition can proceed on the original timeline." The relief in the room was physical. I could feel it change the air. "However," I continued, "I've also accepted a consulting offer from Vantage for next-generation platform development. MedBridge maintains the current system and manages the Stellantis integration. My team handles what comes next." Arthur nodded slowly. "That's fair. And Marcus Tran leads the MedBridge side of the integration. That's non-negotiable." "Agreed," said Tom Wakefield on the screen. Harriet looked at me across the table. "Nathan, Robert would be proud of how you handled this." I thought about Robert in his office, with the whiteboard full of logistics diagrams. The man who'd built a company because he couldn't accept a world where supply chain failures cost people their lives. The man who'd looked at me across a conference table 20 years ago and said, "I want to make sure the work can't be destroyed by someone who doesn't understand it." I think he'd say we both did our jobs, I said. Friday, 6 p.m. Patricia and I sat on the back porch as the sun went down over the Houston skyline, far enough away to be a glow on the horizon rather than something pressing down on us. She'd made dinner, the chicken enchiladas she made for special occasions, and we ate outside because the September evening had finally decided to behave like fall was actually possible. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like putting down something heavy." I thought about it. I've been carrying that company in my chest for 29 years. The weight of it. And now it's still there, but it's not mine to carry anymore. It's Marcus's. It's the people there who know how to do it right. Are you sad about it? I was honest with myself before I answered. A little. It's hard to let go of something you built. But sad isn't the main thing I feel. I turned the beer bottle in my hands. I feel like I finished something. Robert started it. I took it as far as I could. Now someone else carries it the next leg. Patricia leaned into my shoulder the way she'd been leaning into it since we were 22 years old and had no idea what the next 30 years were going to ask of us. From inside the house, I could hear Owen on a video call with his parents, narrating something with the full conviction of a 3-year-old who had never once doubted that whatever he was saying was important. His voice bounced off the kitchen walls and out through the screen door. My phone buzzed one last time. Marcus Tran. Mr. Caldwell, official letter from HR just came through. VP of Platform Engineering. Wanted you to know the first thing I did was update the system documentation protocol you always said I kept putting off. It's done. Thank you for everything. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the porch railing and picked up my beer. There was a blue heron working the drainage ditch at the back of the yard. We got them occasionally, picking their way through the shallow water with that particular kind of patience that makes you feel hurried by comparison. Patricia pointed at it without saying anything. I nodded. 29 years, 72 hours. One clause that Robert Ashworth had written into a contract on a Tuesday afternoon in 2009, in a building that didn't exist anymore. To protect work that was going to outlast all of us. Some things you build for yourself. Some things you build because the world needs them to exist, and you happen to be the person standing there with the tools. Robert had known the difference. I'd spent 29 years learning it. And Marcus Tran, 28 years old, second-generation immigrant, Wayne State engineering graduate who could hold a full system architecture in his head and explain it to a client over lunch without using a single slide. Marcus was going to spend the next 29 years knowing it in his bones. The heron lifted off without warning, rose above the fence line, and disappeared into the Houston sky. I didn't reach for my phone. There was nothing on it that needed me anymore. For the first time in almost 3 decades, the evening belonged entirely to itself.